Thank you.
Yeah,
All
that's all you
right.
need. Yeah, it's on one.
And I turn this on over here? That. Okay. Is it on? Whoa. All right, it's on. Okay.
You all set?
All right. Thank you. Wow, y'all came. Appreciate that. Thank you for coming. This is like an early session, which means it's kind of expendable. But you came. You ate breakfast. Why'd you come?
See you.
Well, thank you for coming. Well, I'm glad to see all of you. It's exciting to get to do this for the third year. It began as a kind of inspiration from Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report, and I was a bit jealous that there wasn't something similar for a focus on design, because most of those reports talk about money and they talk about quality, and quality correlates to, you would think, experience. And all her reports point this out, but it's like in smaller writing, and it's called different things. So I thought that putting a focus on it could do something, and I'm glad that it might be useful to all of you. I say it might be because I'm not sure. Like, who's a creative person in here? Like, are you ever sure about what you do? Right? So it's just, I don't know, but it's our best effort, and I'm very excited about it. And usually I make it in Keynote, but then I realized we distribute it like by PDF and SlideShare and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go through the PDF and zoom through it. It's very casual, okay? And I need to make sure that I stay on time because I can't see sometimes. So I'll make sure we get out of here on time. I'm very big on time. I like the bullet train in Japan. It's like always on time, right? It's like 11:23. It's 11:23. It's bizarre. So we will end on time. And for the past 2 years, I've always asked Jackie Shu from Kleiner Perkins to join me on the stage to talk about talent, and she's here this year again. So please welcome Jackie over there. And this is really almost a volunteer project, side project. You know this thing called side project? This is like a side project, and I want to note that it began with my hanging out with some of the partners at Kleiner Perkins who were really curious about doing something interesting. I'll call this the quote-unquote the younger folks who wanted to do something. So we kind of like got together and just did this. And also Aviv Gilboa is not here, but he's listening remotely. Justin Sayarath also. They've all left Kleiner Perkins to do different things, and you can see their bios online. And this year, Fatima Kaba designed the report. And this is a very important milestone because the past 2 years, I've designed the report while making it, which, as you know, doesn't work really well because you're like, you're making a pizza, and all you care is putting the cheese on the pizza. You have to ship it. So I've gotten so much criticism that the design and tech report is poorly designed. So this year it's designed, you know, it's got a lot of light typography. We love that light typography. So, and I'm like an older person, so like I don't, you know, like, but for the younger folks, this is for you. And it really is, it's so much more beautiful than anything in the past, so please enjoy that design by Fatima. So, looking back at the design and tech reports, you know, when we launched it, we thought it might get 10,000 views in 1 year. Turned out it got like a lot more views. So it was kind of exciting because it turned out that different people would use it inside their company to really kind of reposition design inside the company. The report has a lot of dollar signs in the beginning because most people in charge love dollar signs. So it attracts them immediately. And then someone asked, well, why isn't there more social justice stuff in it? It's towards the end. So it's like that, you know, oatmeal, hide the medicine. And it works out okay, I think. So that's why it's structured like that. The 2015 report was largely about pointing out that any company that was built after 2008, 2009 was advantaged because it started with a mobile thinking mode, whereas companies prior to that year were all desktop-based. So they're essentially stuck in the past and trying to renew, whereas those companies made after 2008 to 2009 heavily advantaged because they had no legacy. 2016 report pointed out that VC firms were bringing in more designers. It pointed out that consulting companies were acquiring creative firms at a huge clip. Notably, McKinsey & Company has done amazing work to build their design practice. And it isn't just a design thinking practice, it's a design making practice. So also pointing out IBM Design has been probably the largest corporate effort to amass design energy, and that's also an impressive thing as well. And also I noted that Google is cool, right? Who would have thought? The perception on Google had definitely shifted. The 2017 report focuses on what I labeled in the last report as computational design. And the reason why I've been labeling this kind of design is because it's a different kind of design than design in the past. It's been around for a few decades. It's producing the most value, but because it has the word design in it, it gets confused with people's glasses, you know? I love your glasses. I love that design. Now produce like scalable output, you know? It doesn't work. This is a different kind of design. So computational design is fundamentally different. So this report sort of drills down into it. Someone's calling me. Who's calling me now? No one. Oh, they hung up. Okay. And the other point we're bringing up is inclusion. And people ask me, why am I focused on inclusion? In my official title at Automatic, that's spelled with 2 T's, because the founder's name is Matt. Automatic. I am the global head of computational design and inclusion. People ask me, why do you have the word inclusion in your title? It's because I believe that design and inclusion are inseparable. And when we separate inclusion into essentially an HR compliance topic, it loses its energy. It's important, of course, but it loses the creativity that's intrinsic to inclusion. So that's why inclusion is in there. This report tries to drill harder into inclusion, to ask how to make inclusion matter in business. It does not succeed at that because there are not many examples of how inclusion can drive greater financial output. That's why I joined Automatic. My hope is that this approach can lead to greater business outcomes for the WordPress ecosystem. I don't know if it'll be possible, but that's my goal. I want to show that it's possible numerically. So, key observations, they're very simple. The first one is the same as last year, which I keep trying to push out there, is people think the design is about beautiful, just about beautiful. But many of you in this room know it's not. It's a tool used by business since the Bauhaus era. Most people don't know that the Bauhaus was funded by the Economic Ministry of Germany. It was a strategy by the country to produce greater GDP. And the Bauhaus was formed because the British made this thing called the Royal College of Art in the mid-1800s. And the V&A Museum, another economic play. It wasn't just for culture, it was to educate people on the standards of experience. And the British made that because they were jealous of the French, who were killing it, making these amazing crafted objects that they could charge much more than the average object. So this is a business play which offends some people who are pure artists, and that's okay, because artists should be offended by everything possible. No, it's okay, that's totally okay. But if you're a designer and you're offended by it, then you're probably more of an artist than a designer, and that's okay too. But I'm very focused on design, the pure design of business. Business schools have moved design thinking out of the clubs. Jackie was the one who pointed out that many of the business schools have clubs around design run by students, but there was nothing in the curriculum. That's shifted. There's a lot of courses in the curriculum in business school. Why? Because business schools are businesses. They're market-driven, so they're moving very quickly, and that's good news too. Other amazing news is McKinsey has appointed design partners at the most senior level. Also, IBM is doing the same, having the highest corporate appointed designers are at the top. So it's very interesting. When people ask, can inclusive design really make a financial difference? I say, well, it's logical. If you want a larger TAM, total addressable market, how do you grow the TAM? you have to reach into people you don't know very well, and therefore you have to be inclusive of them, and you have to understand them. Computational designers are key. Computational designers are the ones, you can call them UX, research, coder hybrids. They're a different kind of designer, and they are the ones that can move at Moore's law speed, and they're the ones that the industry has so few of right now. That's why many of you can command a very high salary in this market, because you are scarce. But that scarcity will eventually go away, because things are changing. Another thing in this report is around design in China. I think that we have a history, at least in the United States, of thinking of made in China as meaning something cheap or copycat. It turns out that if that's the way you think about China and how it's moving forward in the mobile revolution, then you're terribly wrong, because they are far more advanced than how we use smartphones here, in the same way that Europeans are far ahead of how we used phones in general, mobile phones. And so there's a bias I've seen a lot. So I admit to having the same biases sometimes. And so in this report, I put a little data in there to just open up some thinking there. Another thing that we noticed in this report, looking at acquisitions, is that you can imagine like a product company being acquired or acqui-hired. But one thing we noticed is that there are companies that are being acquired that are a bit different. Two types of companies are design tool companies, making special tools for the user experience industry is an acquirable company to build. Why? It's because many of in the industry know that design doesn't scale in tech companies. And so if you want it to scale, if you want to move faster, you need better tools. There is no equivalent to Git in the design community. And whoever makes that is going to do pretty well. Not at a gigantic scale, of course, but at the scale that design matters to the industry. The other category of company that we found interesting is that there are community companies. Like a DeviantArt was acquired by Wix recently. If you actually look backwards, Behance was acquired by Adobe. So they're community companies. But as you know, it's kind of awkward to acquire a community company, because who in the community wants to be acquired, right? So different kind of company to be acquired. And lastly, everyone knows this now, but voice and chat interfaces are so relevant to design. And because most of design is biased towards the eyes or to something visual, it's very hard to get designers to move into this space. But for many reasons, chat and voice are just so much easier to use for many people who don't want all the special UX magic applied to their eyes, and maybe some of them can't see also. So there's different reasons for why that's emerging at a different rate, and that is exciting. So the Design Tech Report is in 5 sections. Computational design, design to what I like to call DE $sign design. It's kind of like my rap version. Commercialized. I want to make a thing. I have temporary tattoos. If you'd like one, I can figure out how to distribute them. But section 3 is about design needs designers, because you can't buy software to design faster yet. You can't buy design that can design for you yet. So the only way to do more design is to have more designers. The 4th section is not fully created. It's in I'm shipping it sort of like in alpha probably, but it's an attempt to talk about my concern about the closing of the web. I've become much more aware of how this idea of being free online is going away in the way that 20 years ago we all knew and took for granted. And that concerns me because it means that less creativity is going to occur over the next decade if we don't stand up for open expression. However, open expression brings all kinds of other bad stuff with it. You're out in the open in a way that a closed system cannot protect you. So it's a subtle issue. Why does it matter to design? It's because design needs more levers to create amazing whole life experiences. And so the open web is important to continue to consider. And lastly, the point I began with, design is by nature inclusive. And it has business value, but defining that is going to be an interesting problem, especially in the computational design era, that I invite you all to be curious about. That's overview. Are we synchronized? Synchronized? I feel synced. Okay, good. Nowadays when you sync stuff, it's like spins, doesn't stop sometimes. But we're synced. Okay, so page 6 is a simple diagram from the last report about the 3 kinds of design. There's classical design. It's design in the way that we love people who go to sleep with a block of wood. You know what I mean, right? Like a furniture maker. Love this wood. I will make that wood thing. And I will not stop. You know what I mean? It's like beautiful. It's like, oh gosh, you can watch a movie about the person making a thing out of wood, right? It's awesome. And then there's design thinking, which is used in organizations, relevant to business. It's the post-it note whiteboard business. It's the anti-convergence business. It's a good business. The third one is computational design. It's design that suffers from the benefit of Moore's law, the speed of it, and the scale of it. So computational design is very different from classical design, because classical design, you're designing for a few people, and you might know them really well. But computational design, you're designing for sometimes millions, billions of people. So your idea that you know that person is terribly off. And that calibration is so hard if you're a classical designer, because you know that piece of wood just as much as you know that code and the user base. Impossible. But it's so hard to get there. I would say this for myself. It took me this many years to kind of like, this is a different kind of design because it isn't about the algorithm, it's about the people. So there's 2 matrices. Everyone loves like grids, right? So if people ask you, what's classical design versus design thinking? Here is an easy peasy chart for you to use anytime you like. Classical design is emphasis on practice. Design thinking is about strategy. So you can go down this later, but I find it useful just as an exercise to go through. A key thing here is that a classical designer focuses on the hands, these beautiful things if you're lucky to have 2, it's amazing. And like how the world works. But design thinking is more about relationships, organizational structure. It is a material too. A lot of classical designers put down design thinkers, like, you're not a real designer. You carry those post-it notes around thinking you're a designer. And they pull out a pencil, and they draw a sketch of your face. I can't do that. I can just post-it note you. I can persona you, I want to tell you that you're a valid design thinker practitioner. You may not be a classical designer, right? So it's a different kind of designer, and you'll probably get paid more money. So there you go. Classical design versus computational design. I framed this last year, but fewer users in computational design is many users. Now, but here's the key one here about perfection. And I know that one of my friends, Michael Rock, made fun of me in Business Week and said I didn't know what I was talking about. That's a friend, And he said, no, classical design is always about changing. There's always changing. I worked with Kanye, it's changing. And he's totally right. A certain kind of design is cultural changing. But the reality is that if you compare it to shipping code and iterating at scale, it's different. It's very different. But only if you're in the matrix, do you understand that difference? And so I love classical design. I love how it's modernized itself. I love how it's become more postmodern. I think it's awesome. But it's not the same as computational design working with millions of people. It's just different. And by accepting that, I think it's helpful to move forward, at least for me. Maybe this is my public therapy. So many people also talk about in the tech industry that women aren't represented. And I want to note that if you think about design in tech, it was created by 4 women. And I've had the chance to know all 4 of them. Do you know all of them? Gillian Crampton Smith, she led a program called the CRD at the Royal College of Art. Who knows her name? Okay, this is good. If you think about Internet of Things, and all these things we see in service design, you can draw a direct connection to the work that she did. And her and her students did. It was amazing. Another person, Joy Mountford, really was in the corporate world, pushing design forward. Someone who, at the executive level, began to advance design and computer-human interface thinking. Who knows Joy Mountford's name? Okay, good. See? So some of you know that. So if someone knows it, that means that it's worthwhile. Red Burns. Red Burns founded the NYU Tisch Interactive Telecommunication Program. Red Burns was behind all of the New York tech activity. Who knows Red Burns' name? Yeah. Red Burns passed away, so I hope you remember her. She's an amazing person. She was always angry at me and also loving to me. She'd always say, she's like, Maeda, what the fuck are you doing with that, stuff, whatever? Why don't you just, make stuff and, so miss her, She's an amazing person. She swore like that. Yeah, it was a little bit interesting. And Muriel Cooper. Muriel Cooper was the art director of MIT Press for 30 years. She was the one who told computer scientists that they needed to use something called Helvetica instead of a dot matrix 5x7 face because it just wasn't legible. And of course, people thought that she was bonkers. Like, why would you want this 5x7, these dots? I can totally read it. So she brought that to the computer. And many of you use CodePen today. CodePen, a great prototyping environment by Chris Coyer and company. This is this state comes from decades of experimentation in computer algorithms and design. The work of Yusuf van Rossum, Eric van Blokland, Drawbot, if you know this work. If you're European, you might know it, but it influenced a lot of the work we see today that is computationally motivated, graphically motivated. You know the X-Files TV show? So they designed the typeface for that. So they were way out there. Also Ben Fry, Casey Reeves, Dan Schiffman, something called Processing. It's an open source system for developing computational plays on shapes and interaction. These were 20 years ago, people made fun of these things. I mean, I was like the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer of the era. What? You mean designers should code? Ostracize. But now it's very normal, but it wasn't normal. It takes a while to make things normal. So a lot of stuff out there to look back to and look forward now. What's interesting we found is that if you talk to design leaders in tech, a lot of them come from engineering. And a lot of them actually suffer this dichotomy of, am I really a designer? So I want you all to know, if you are one of those, you're a computational designer. You're someone who is steeped in computation. I find more and more designers who are crossing this bridge between code. It doesn't have to be just code. It can be data science as well and research. It can be quantitative design. And it's an exciting time. But the problem is people who are in this hybrid state don't have anywhere to go because they don't fit a certain mold. For instance, recently I surveyed a bunch of our designers and devs in Automatic about JavaScript competency. I learned ES6 on lynda.com recently. That's a terrible thing. But anyways, JavaScript fluency. And I noticed 2 humps of fluency. And I thought it was interesting how these are the core devs, and these are the designer hybrids. They're people who are kind of the in-between people. So if you're an in-between person, I suggest you get excited because there's a lot of you out there, a lot more than you think. And those who choose to be here and computation agnostic, that's okay. It's totally okay. But the world is moving. And moving with the world is what designers do, I believe. Because in a sense, if you come from a classical design world, you want to be more creative. You have to take in new ideas. And my former boss, Nicholas Negroponte, would always say, where do new ideas come from? The answer is simple, differences. Creativity comes from unlikely juxtapositions. And so I encourage you, if you're a pure designer, to impurify yourself because it's a whole new world and there's lots to learn. Now, okay, so that's the computational design section. I want to talk now about design by the numbers. And there's a great little book by Irene Au at KOSLA called Design and Venture Capital. If you're curious about venture capital and design, it's a free O'Reilly book. And a lot of interesting things are in there. Whoa, look at that. Preview quit. Okay, DIT, which one is it? This one right here. Okay. I'm with you. See, it wants attention. Your USB-C thing bothers me, but it's okay. No, not okay. So this slide is about design and M&A activity. You can look at it later. There's 2 slides because there's so much activity to record. If you look at the red is the software tools versus creative communities. Difference between 2016 and 2015 is the number is roughly the same. Didn't go up or go down, but it continues to be large. And to reiterate, this big thing happened where 4 design partners were elected into McKinsey & Co.'s partner level, which is pretty amazing, out of 5 design partners at McKinsey. And IBM just appointed 3 distinguished designers, which in IBM world is a really big deal. So it's like way up there. So times are changing. This page is about startups, because we talk about startups, and I'm not sure if you've seen this list by Anand Sarwal. It's the top 20 reasons startups fail. Number 1, no market. So, number 2, that's a good one, isn't it? Well, there was no market. Okay, darn. Either ran out of cash, not the right team. But if you haven't read it yet, there's a great interview by Mark Kawano, with Mark Kawano. He's an ex-Apple designer, founded this company called Storehouse. You may have used it. It was this beautiful blogging platform. And he had to close his company. And he's such a graceful man. And when I interviewed him recently, but he talked about how he was so glad he did this very, very hard thing. Because when you do a hard thing, what happens? You learn new things. So, and the harder the thing is, the more you learn. So as a creative person, he was completely sated. And I say this because most people don't realize that artists and designers can make companies. But they can because they like to be challenged, pushed to the edge, just like an engineer might want to as well. So I encourage designers to read his story and other stories like his, designers who have taken this on. Designers you might know, like Joe Gebbe and Brian Chesky making Airbnb. So it does happen. But again, companies do fail. So the goal isn't to fail, of course. But success is not guaranteed by any means. This one is about the different funds that are design and inclusion oriented. This is John's list. It isn't like, carefully data science. But list of early stage and later stage funds that I think are slightly more diversity, inclusion, design oriented. There's 2 new funds. I'm not sure if you know about it. Backstage Capital, Arlen Hamilton, and Initialized Capital. Do you know Gary Tan? He made the system Posterous. He was a YC partner, a great designer engineer. So the past Design and Tech report talked about how I thought there'd be more funds being created by designers. So that's happening. I'm not sure how many funds will be created, but it's a number I'd like to watch. Why is it important? It's important because if you're making a company, you can talk to a person who runs a fund, who understands what it's like to be a designer. So it's an inclusion thing. It just helps to grow the inclusiveness of this wonderful thing called money. There's also the NEA. NEA is New Enterprise Associates, a venture capital firm. Dana Grayson and Albert Lee published a report called The Future of Design in Startups. And it points out the different kind of startups out there, design-centric, design-committed, design-mature, design unicorns, and all of them are looking for designers. This is interesting. So all these companies at all stages want to hire designers. So designers are in demand, but specifically computational designers. I can't tell you how many CEOs I worked with when I was at Kleiner Perkins, and they'd say, I hired a designer, but it didn't work out. And I said, what kind of designer did you hire? And the response was, what kind of designers are there? You see what I mean? So I said, well, you have to hire a computational designer because that's the kind you're looking for. If they are a traditional designer, yes, they can make that jump, but you won't get immediate lift. So you have to find the right designer. There's all kinds of designers. And Justin pulled this number that the biggest companies, not just the startups, but Facebook, Google, Amazon, are all trying to hire more designers as well. So if you're a designer, it's a good time for you. And I mentioned about business schools. Big news this year. So this is all the schools that have a design in their curriculum. But this year, 2 designers you might know of who co-founded Design Observer are now teaching in business school. And I can tell you they like it a lot better with their good cafeteria there. Cafeteria business school is amazing. So that's where I learned in business school. So definitely check out the cafeteria. It's nice. Do you know what I'm talking about? Cafeteria is good, right? You've been to them. Okay, good. Other thing is Koi Bin's report on tools that designers use. He had a 2015 report. He doesn't have a 2016 one, but I got a little peek, and the data is fairly similar. In the industry, there is no one single tool that everyone uses to communicate, to coordinate, and this is really a problem because it means we can't unify and scale. On the other hand, you can say this is an awesome thing because we can all take our own way. We can be individual, but it doesn't lead to scaling. So this is a problem I think we have. There are new tools emerging. There's Josh Brewer, he's former Twitter, as a new tool called Abstract. It hopes to be a Git-like replacement for designers. There's also a Figma collaborative one, collaborative design tool. So there's other tools out there. So I just urge you to look for the right tool because it isn't out there, or make a company that will create that tool. This is my point about the different companies that are acquiring communities. Track 5. There's probably going to be more, but there's not that many communities out there, so we won't see a lot of this. In our survey, we asked if you were able to get venture capital funding, would you take it? And 80% of designers, roughly 700 surveyed, would take the money. 20% wouldn't take the money. That's okay. But the question was, if you take the money, what would you do? Number one answer was a product studio, not a consumer or enterprise startup. And a product studio is this great piece by Jules called the 2016 State of the Digital Nation. It's like 10,000 words long, and every word is worth it. And his point is that, why build the ship when you can build a shipyard? So if you're going to go big, you should build not the ship, build the machine that makes the ship. And product studios, I think, are becoming in the conscious of designers, which is exciting. It's a different way to scale. China. So I asked 2 CEOs, 2 designer CEOs, and they shared their information about things that I didn't know. Did you know that 3 designer co-founded Chinese companies have a combined market cap of over $300 billion? Whoa, right? Alibaba, Visual China, Xiaomi, they all have designer co-founders. Didn't know that. Successful experiences. So it links together, correlates, right? And these are a few venture-backed startups in China, and some of them are fascinating, so I urge you to check them out. Unfortunately, you can't because they're a different language. But I can tell you, though, that the thinking is very different. So this is from Ling Fan, 4 trends that I asked, are there 4 trends that I should talk about in the Design and Tech Report? So he said, number 1, QR codes. Designers hate QR codes, right? Like, oh, I hate QR codes. But they're really awesome. They're just so easy. Like, I have a snap code in my cover of the report, but I don't, they're ugly. But computers like it. And the QR codes are important for offline. So they can take a picture, they can scan it later. It's a beautiful physical bookmarking tool. In Europe, we've seen parts of adoption, but China is all-out adoption. This example he gives is of the Chinese custom of money giving and this character food. And there's an AR game where you look for every instance of it and you scan it, and you get money. So that's like bigger than like Pokemon, essentially, that game. So, but it's done by everybody, not just the Pokemon lovers. Be careful. And voice. I liked how he told me that WeChat lets people leave up to 60-second voice messages. So people are holding the speak button on WeChat and speak to the cell phone everywhere. And they're doing micro classes and micro Q&A apps. So it makes you think, right? Also, bike sharing is very, the kind of Uber for bike sharing is very common, where like bikes are like laying out on the street that you can pick up. They have chips in them, they have GPS, they have a way that they're less likely to get stolen. And so this is a few of the trends. I just urge you, if you're a designer, check out what's happening in China because it's very advanced. Okay, we're halfway time-wise through. How you doing? You doing okay? Yeah. You okay? All right, let's keep going. All right, design needs designers. And I'm a big HR geek. I love HR. You must say, like, why do you like HR? I said because HR stands for highly regarded. Because when HR does its job in the way that makes a community work better, what is a company? It is people. And HR is about people. And HR is strategic. Let me let it be that way. So for me, and if you're a boss somewhere, it's all about the talent. Who do you recruit? So I'm big on that. So design needs designers. And some of you know the organization AIGA. It is a classically minded design organization. But since Julie Annixter has taken over, it is moving very fast. It's becoming much more design and business oriented. Julie invited me to give a special business session at the AIGA National Conference, which I said, is that going to be okay? And she said, this time it's going to be okay. And sure enough, I invited different people in venture capital, different startup people, and it was a full session. So, and why is it a full session? It's because the membership cares about things that are not just about print. I mean, I love print. I've done the whole thing. Silk screening, set type, photo. I've done that. I love that. It's awesome. But the world's going to change. And if you want to make a living and you don't have a trust fund, you got to get moving. So what's interesting in this year's AIGA survey of the most important words for the future of AIGA, digital is number one. Now, I can tell you 10 years ago, that would not be the number. It wouldn't be that. That wouldn't, right? It wouldn't be digital or interactive. Number one and number two, digital interactive. For those of you who don't know this world of classical design, you're like, big deal. Come on. Well, it's a big deal. It means there's a phase change in the traditional design world. And it also pointed out that the most satisfied designers are the people who are out here in the corporate world in digital design as well. So there's something happening in the AIGA, and I'm really delighted to work with them nowadays. If you're curious about how they're changing, check out Julie Annixter's work. She's an amazing leader. People ask, how do you become a better designer in tech? I'm serious. I do listen to lynda.com videos all the time to catch up on the latest stuff. People think I'm an expert. I will tell you, I was an expert in 1996. And every year I kept learning. I never stopped learning. But anyone who's in this game, if you aren't like watching videos and learning, you get behind in like 2 months. So I'm with you on that. For those of you who no longer look at these things, great, good for you. This is a free world still. But for those who want to keep fighting crime, you gotta learn. And it's very hard for people to learn in current art and design schools because it isn't, this kind of stuff isn't in the curriculum. So, but there's a lot of good free options out there. And I put the Media Lab there as free. So I was a professor there for 12 years. People don't know that. It's free to go there. If you want to get a graduate degree, it's free. It's paid for. There are paid for programs like that. It's hard to get into, but they exist out there. So when people tell me they're going to go to graduate school and like go into debt, I say, not a good idea. Look for free as much as you can. There's a bunch of inexpensive options as well out there. You know, I like my Lynda subscription. And there are tuition options. Great program by Liz Danzico, IXD. Jared, I forgot his name now. What? Jared Spool. Thank you. I was going to go Jared, horrible artist. Jared Spool's school, Center, is in Tennessee. It's a UX school. That's probably like an amazing program. I haven't looked at it carefully, but Jared's like, you know, the guy. Also, SCAD has a program with Google now. They have a whole UX BFA, which is very interesting. Let's see here. Fatima, who did the design of this report. Can we get some applause for Fatima? Fatima wanted to put in this slide about writing, because a lot of times designers don't know that words are important. I know a few designers like that. Do you know these designers out there? You do know them, right? The words are really important because the graphics don't make sense sometimes. So, and in different languages, different things mean something, and words are really, you know, stick it. So she listed up the programs that put writing at the core of the education process and different resources for designers to really love their content strategist, appreciate them more, appreciate copywriters who are part of the design experience. So thank you, Fatima, for that. This is from last year, Design Education Gap. We surveyed a bunch of people who are in school, out of school, and asked them if you were, we'll fix that spelling one. This is mean understanding business and finance. But if you're in school, you don't get any business stuff, no data stuff. When you're out of school, you want that business stuff and data stuff. And this is a problem. And this problem cannot be resolved in an easy fashion. It'll take roughly 20 years for it to change, and by then it's too late, I believe. So I'm a fan of those free options. I tell people I meet to study free things. But also there's this new book coming out by Rochelle King. She's the head of design and data at Spotify, along with her colleagues, Elizabeth Churchill and Caitlin Sa. It's called Designing with Data. It's coming out. It's a great book. It makes data science and design and testing really clear. So I highly recommend that book. And Rochelle's an amazing leader. Originally an engineer, just like me. Now, we're going to talk about organizations. So what I realize is that there's so many types of organizations. There's no perfect structure. So I have here like 3 structures of company A, company B, company C. Someone might look at it and say it looks kind of familiar, or maybe you have a different structure. But the structure of organization determines the outcome. And I've worked with Jackie a lot, not just in the design space, but asking how the corporate whole model works. I'm on the board of a few companies, so I can see the whole structure, and I'm very curious about that. And Jackie is my go-to person. So come on up, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Jackie, how you doing?
Austin, how are you guys?
Hey.
It's great to be back. Thank
Okay.
you for having us for the 3rd year. Before we start, can we do a selfie
Let's do that.
with the crowd?
Oh, this is like a new thing.
Yeah.
This is what the young people do. Okay.
Hi, wave hi.
Yeah, hi. We're doing it. Okay. Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So as John mentioned, we did a survey. We released it out to the world, and I bet some of you here in this room participated in it. And if you did, thank you. In the survey, we asked, about reporting structures, and about close to 50% of designers say that design at their organization reports into the CEO. Now, keep in mind that 50% does not break down the size of the company, nor does it differentiate whether the person is at an agency or at a company. So we took a deeper dive and broke out the numbers for people that were at a company, so in-house designers, and looked at what the trends were within reporting structures. And what we noticed, and it's a little bit intuitive, what we noticed was at smaller companies, the design teams tend to report into the CEO. As you get larger, around the 200 to 500 people size, it starts to shift. And then what takes over is that product. So design is reporting into product. Is that resonating with you guys, or is this data just completely off? Yeah, I see a lot of nods. And so it was just really interesting to kind of see, the trends of the various functions that kind of oversaw design. And then at the really large companies, at companies that were 2,000 people and above, the other categories started increasing, which makes sense. If you're at a Ford, maybe design reports into the head of innovation or the head of digital. And so all these titles are a little bit less defined, and there's a lot more variety. And then we also looked at motivation. We wanted to understand what were motivating factors for all of you sitting here to wake up every day and go to your jobs. The number one factor for people maybe thinking about switching roles or leaving their company was the impact and the challenge of the work that they were working on. Everyone wanted to work on meaningful work. I think it's important to keep in mind, compensation is very low at the end, and part of that is because over the last few years, compensation has adjusted for itself. So the market is starting, has been paying designers a very aggressive compensation similar to engineering. So that's all things being equal, right? So that's not a factor as much, but that's because I think most companies have adjusted for the demand, the high demand in design talent, and they're now paying up because of that supply demand. And now what everyone, is thinking about is, I want to have an impact. I want to work on meaningful work. So if you're a manager in the room, these are what, your teams care about, which I'm sure you know. And then we looked at, reporting structures within design. So a lot of times people come to us, and here at Kleiner Perkins, a lot of design leaders will say, well, how is it structured at other companies? Is design one holistic team, or does marketing also own design? How many of you here have one holistic team in your organization? Okay, so it's, in our data, it was at agencies, it was a much higher number. It was 70%, which makes sense at the agencies. At in-house companies, it was about a 50-50. So 50% was one holistic design team, and then the other 50 was maybe split. Usually design and marketing would kind of share those responsibilities. And so I want to turn it over to you, John. Now that you've left the venture world and you're at Automatic, what have you seen? How's it structured at Automatic, and how's it structured at some of the companies where you're on the boards of?
Well, I want to note that I really knew nothing about startups until I joined Kleiner Perkins, and I joined the same day as Jackie. And Jackie had just come from Twitter, where she was a global head of recruiting. She's been at Facebook, the whole Silicon Valley dream. And I felt like I know nothing at all. You know about that thing where you go to school and she has the best lunchbox? And I was like, whoa, my lunchbox so battered. Her lunchbox, aluminum.
I think in the 90s I was playing with Legos, so you're way ahead. You were playing with computers.
But I've learned the startup world through Jackie, and one thing by talking with Jackie, I realized how all these companies are so different in each way, and so what I wanted to do was learn by myself, because at the board level you can observe all the parts, but there's nothing like being in the engine room. So it's been an amazing experience understanding exactly this statistic over here about people want to have challenging work. They want to make change happen. And I think what happens is that oftentimes creative people, this is their main driver. And if that can't be sated, they get unhappy and they leave. But the problem is this kind of work is a kind of work that seems like bonus work, not the main work. So my question as a manager is, how do I put the two together in some constructive way? How do you make time to learn and grow? So that's something I didn't know was pervasive in a busy tech company.
And is it hard having a remote team? Automatic, everyone's 100% remote.
Yeah, I work in a company where it's 500 people across 50 countries, and they're all remote. It's very fascinating. It's like living in the Matrix. I think it's not as easy because you are in physical space. You can't see faces. You can emoji till the cows come home to react. You know what I'm talking about? So for me, it's been a great experience. I really enjoy the challenge of it all.
Cool.
Good.
Well, thanks, John.
Thank you, Jackie. All right. All right. We have 15. Okay, here we go. So this one is the one I haven't figured out yet. It's little pieces. I love Chance the Rapper. I find him such a fascinating man. I just bought this hat on eBay for like $100 because you can't buy it anymore. Oops. Anyways, I don't make songs for free. I make them for freedom. I love this young man. It was making me think about what's the relationship to creativity and industry, and just being relevant and giving a damn. And so I'm really glad that I'm working in an old ecosystem. Have you heard of this thing called blogging? It's really old. It's like been around since like the dinosaurs. 1999, the world of blogging. Actually, things like people like Ed Williams are from this era, right? So like WordPress, YouTube, Tumblr, and now we don't need blogging because we have these like systems, right? They're like amazing, shiny, incredible systems. Like, why would you want to have a blog? Because you can like rent an amazing condo, right? Like right next to the river. Like, why would you make a house? It's too much work to make a house. What I didn't realize is that the challenge with the closed web is that you really are just renting. And how do you retrieve ownership in this era? I think is what Chance the Rapper taught me. How do you take control of who you are and what you are on your own terms? I would prefer to do that. So I'm fascinated by the blogging world now because of the WordPress connection. I'm also very interested in how the mobile world also feels very close today. There's a great article by Chris Dixon that you can view later. It's about the decline of the mobile web. It was written 2 years ago. But it's a fact that as the web gets more closed, it means you can be told what you cannot do. You can't submit that to the store. You can't display it that way. I'm going to take your app off of the ecosystem. All these things become possible in sometimes unpredictable ways, for good reason sometimes, because there's bad stuff out there, and it should get taken out for all the right moral reasons. And so, in a sense, the open world is so much more complex, but I believe it's where design could thrive the most. Do you know the statistic that 8 out of 10 smartphone apps, top 10, are Google or Facebook apps? It's pretty amazing. You think you have choice, but you don't have choice. It's being constricted around you. And design is such a mess today in computational design. Everyone knows these like browser compatibility diagrams. Like, what is this stuff, right? And like, why don't the browsers run ES6? Oh, we transpile it, it's okay. I'm like, who would do that? We didn't do that 20 years ago. This is like a different kind of thinking. So, and also the kinds of devices, all the sizes, designing for all these constraints, it's a whole different world. It's a much harder world to get design done the old way. And so I'm heartened. Whoa, the links work. That's good. So good. They don't, Keynote, it doesn't work that way sometimes, so we just fixed that. Thank you, Fatima. Behance had a crowdsourced design trends guide, and it has all these great things that we love, like semi-flat design, cinemagraphs, and 3D, and landing page, and colors. And my favorite one was SEO is important. Because it really is the design constraint that you have to design for in parallel, that as a typical designer, you wouldn't care about. Like, I'm gonna design this beautiful page that nobody visits, right? So I'm fascinated by SEO and anything algorithmic as a designer. How do I actually make the best impact of this page? And how to design with those constraints are just as important as style questions. So I urge designers who are deep in the style world to look at this world of SEO. It's messy, it's ugly, it doesn't seem designery, but it's computational designery. It's very relevant to this day and age right now. I mentioned chat systems. 1 billion people are on Facebook Messenger now, 846 million on WeChat. And these are all conversational interfaces. Conversational interfaces. Remember MS-DOS? Who thought it would come back, right? But they're spare interfaces that do what? They remove all the graphics that evolved over decades. Bam. What is that interface? So these, and this is Product Hunt Search this morning. There's tons of these kinds of things, and they are designed. They're interesting. So I urge you as a designer to look at these kinds of experiences as well. I'm talking to myself, by the way, not talking at you, because I had so many biases I had to break down. So please take it that way. I'm like, what were you doing, John? What were you thinking? So I'm glad to be a little more awake now. We love voice interfaces today, but it took a long time. I'm not sure if you've seen Put That There. It was a DARPA demo, early 1980s. When you watch it, you'll think like, oh my gosh, that's Alexa. But it took this many years for it to happen. Jacob Nielsen, famous user interface design guy. Voice will not replace the screen. 2003. What happened was machine learning happened. And this is a statistic that Benedict Evans points out. that before machine learning, error rate was roughly a quarter. Quarter error rate's really bad. But after machine learning, the error rates are below 10%, and they're just getting lower and lower. So if you lived in this era, you would think it's impossible, but this era had a phase change of the machine learning. So think about the fact that there's so many ways to rethink voice interface as a designer. It doesn't have visual issues in the same way, but it has cognitive issues and sociological issues and experience issues that are amazing to get to work on. I have a little row here you can watch later. I have when Ellen talked to Siri. It's adorable. You know Ellen DeGeneres? I love her. When IBM Watson won Jeopardy. This is a news anchor apparently said Alexa. If I say this, someone's Alexa turned on just somewhere. If it's in their room. Alexa, buy chocolate. It's really easy for that to happen. Adobe has a little hack on photo editing by voice. You can check this out later. This is by Amy Elliott. If you don't know her work, it's amazing work. She's a design director of Simply Secure and Not-for-Profit. She's pointing out that the open web will not survive if it doesn't address security. She gave me a statistic from a person, it's Krebs on security, how what can happen is the IoT devices in your house can be taken over to become weaponized to attack other sites. And why is that relevant? It's relevant if you're like a journalist with a site that's open. These botnets can come on and go after your site and take it down. What happens is you cannot revive your site because the service provider thinks of you as too expensive. Apparently, if you want a site that is resistant, as a journalist, you need to pony up 150 to 200K to solve that problem, which, as you know, is unsustainable. So look at her work. It's really interesting. She's an ex-IDEO person, so design in the security industry is a fascinating space. I highly recommend it. Okay. Wow, we're on time. So design is by nature inclusive. So Kat Holmes is an amazing designer who has really kind of honed in this notion that inclusion and design are critical. She's the one that changed my biases around thinking of inclusion as just limited to someone who has accessibility issues. Because we all have these issues. Like, who's getting older right now? Everyone, yeah? And when we get older, these things don't move as well. This doesn't work as well, too. So the kind of issues that people you think are less able become yourself eventually, and they're important to know. I want to reiterate that if you're in a voice interface space, the best person to talk to is someone who's blind, who is an expert at voice interfaces. And the problem without being inclusive is things happen. I'm not sure if this is a timeline we pulled together, July 2015. I'm not sure if you remember how Google mistakenly tagged African American people or black people in general as gorillas. Airbnb customers were complaining about racism. There was a HBS study. Snapchat had a filter that made you look oriental with the slanty eyes, and that was okay. These things happen all the time in companies that don't have people who can actually speak to how that's not okay. So I'm not going to criticize the companies for doing this. I'll criticize the company if they don't have the feedback loop. And what's great about the press is the press can point out this is an issue, and maybe we should stop. And they do stop, and they also change inside these companies. The problem with these kind of issues is that they only surface when problems occur, because a problem has to be solved. It has a material impact on the financial performance of the company. I'd like to imagine a world where it isn't just about the problem. What if it's actually just a way of thinking of, well, that could have cost you $20 million that day if you didn't think this way. Maybe we shouldn't even go this direction. So that's what I'm excited about. And in our survey, we asked about the top companies that have design perception rising. It turns out that those that are generally inclusion focused are rising to the top. Airbnb has a whole inclusion focus. Slack, as you know, has an amazing work in their engineering space. And Microsoft with their inclusive toolkit, which if you haven't seen yet, is a beautiful example of how to share the knowledge of how to work inclusively through videos, through course materials, incredible kit that Kat and the Microsoft team have done. Also, Phil Gilbert, IBM, let me know just an hour ago that IBM also has an excellent accessibility handbook online, and the link will be up here when I repost it. But it's also had over 50,000 views, and it was presented in Congress. So the larger companies, Apple also has a powerful effort in this area. So if you're a smaller company, look to what they're doing, leverage this work, because what's lovely about what they're doing is it's all open source. It's all shared. So good for them. It's good stuff. And it isn't just for good, it's for good business. Because at the end of the day, I believe that designers are the ones that can change the inclusion conversation. Because in our survey we asked, is having a more diverse design team important to you personally? And 90% said yes. That's a huge number. It validated to me that creative people are inherently inclusive, and the work you do in your company or the work in the company that you lead can actually have a material impact on a company's thinking about inclusion, and therefore allow you to make products for a larger total addressable market. So this is all up later. You can look at it. This is a quote by Mary Meeker from her one of their Internet Trends reports. One of the things I have learned about effective decision making is that the best decisions are often made by diverse groups of people. Saying or hearing these words is magic. That's really interesting. I had never thought of that way before. Thank you. Don't you know that moment? It's the moment of inclusive thinking. It's the moment of addressing your own missing piece. I want to close with a note about diversity and inclusion. I've noticed that many diversity inclusion consultants will talk about blind spots. And I find it so ironic that if you are blind, to some blind people, blind spot is an offensive word because it means you're dumb. You missed something. So I asked my lexicographer friend, what's a better word? Erin McKean, the word expert. She says the best word is lacuna, L-A-C-U-N-A. It's an English word, it's in the dictionary. And the plural is lacunae, L-A-C-U-N-A-E. And you can remember it as Hakuna Matata, Lion King. So lacuna is a great word. So we all have lacunas. I've had enormous lacunas over these decades, and I'm trying to address them right now. So this is my learnings that I hope you'll be able to be useful to you. And a lot of people helped to make this happen. They're all up there. And I want to thank you for your attention, and have a great day.